Hey everyone, welcome to the Arise podcast. We're hosted by Arise Capital, where every week we bring on Christian-minded business people to talk about the kingdom and business and how it all gels together. I'm your host, Chris Hinsey.
And I'm Christian Lambert.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Arise podcast. We're so excited to have you guys here today. We actually have our first guest today. Christian and I are super excited to welcome Dr. Byrd onto this podcast. Brian is a really good friend of mine now. Actually, we've known each other for a few years, and we meet at random places sometimes, like the original Pancake House, which delicious pancakes.
Yummy.
Yes. And just really kind of discipling me and helping me through a lot of problems recently. So I just thank you and honor you for that. And thank you for being on our podcast. So for our listeners, Dr. Byrd, he's done a lot. He owns Texas Family Medicine here in Fort Worth, Texas. He also had a hospice company called Texas Hospice that he sold. I'm sure he'll tell us all about. And so we're just really excited to hear your story today, Brian. And you know, we talked a little bit about the word arise and just how, you know, to see the fulfillment of God's promises, we have to go through hard stuff. And you and I have talked so much about just how much fun it actually is to be an entrepreneur, but how hard it is as well.
Yeah.
and it's glory in everything. But so I guess my first question is, can you just tell us a little bit about you, your story, just whatever you want us to know about your story, getting into entrepreneurship world as a believer?
Happy to. And Chris and Christian, thanks for having me on your podcast. Really cool that you guys are doing this, right? And you guys, I can tell, are just always thinking new ideas and starting new companies. And I'm very impressed. In my entrepreneur career, I have just been probably too hyper-focused on just, hey man, I'm going to find my lane and stay in it. And it's kept me from, you know, bouncing out and doing new things. But I didn't have the creativity that you guys have that I've seen. And I think this podcast is a good example of that. So I think it's really cool because there's all kinds of people that think about getting into entrepreneuring or have gotten into entrepreneuring. But since they haven't done it, they're, number one, they're scared, like we all are, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What in the world am I getting into here, right? Is this going to work? You mean I'm not going to have a paycheck that somebody's just going to give me twice a month? Well, wait a minute. What if my sales drop? What if my staff quits? What if I fail to do the tax calculation correctly, and then I get a big tax bill at the end of the year? I mean, there are so many things, so many facets to all of this. Can I really do it? And I think this podcast can be an encouragement to people who really want to do it, because you really got to want it. I mean, you got to really want it.
Yeah.
But if you really want it, this podcast would be an encouragement just to hear the stories of people who have been slugging away for a few years and have had a modicum of success, or maybe a lot of success, and some failures, which we've all had.
Right.
And to encourage people who've had failures, keep going, learn from it, keep moving forward. And before I jump into stories I've shared with Chris, I just happened to be reading in Hebrews chapter 12, and I think it's about the 6th verse, where it says that discipline from the Lord is not fun at first. In fact, it hurts. It's painful, but then it produces this wonderful a crop of wisdom and diligence and endurance. And the other verse that I would refer to a lot was the James 1:2-4, which, you know, consider it joy when all kinds of trials and temptations come into your lives. I'll never forget, and I'll jump into the story here. By the way, tell me to shut up anytime.
No.
I'm also a formerly elected official, so if you give a politician a microphone, you might never get it back. But anyhow, I'll never forget, I grew up in a business family, so I always thought I would go into business, but I also had a love for medicine. So I was about 32, 33 years old. I'd been out of residency for a couple of years. I had my own practice. I was seeing patients. I was enjoying that. However, there was something in here in my chest that said, I'm missing out on something else.
Wow.
And I met a guy who was about 20 years my senior, and he had been an internal medicine doc his whole life, and he was unbelievable. I mean, believe me, if you want a doc, if you need a doctor, he's who you want. He was great. But I also looked at him and I said, that's not who I want to be.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah.
Turn him loose in a hospital, amazing.
Right.
Turn him loose on a board of directors, organizational leadership, strategy, risk taking. He's not your guy.
Right.
You know? And I realized, I just looked in the mirror 20 years from now. If I don't get started in business, I'm going to wake up 20 years from now and I will have missed my opportunity to do it.
Wow.
And so that was the original impetus for, let's do something. Let's do something really cool. And probably like a lot of people, I was inspired by other people I had seen that had started businesses. I also had a love for hospice care because I had done some of that, done some home visits for my patients. And I just fell in love with bringing really God's love to people who were in a very difficult situation. I also loved it that we spent so many resources on human beings who were dying. Because even when we're dying, we're still unbelievably valuable because we're made in God's image.
That's right.
And I just loved all of that about hospice care.
Yeah.
I began working for a hospice company. And at some point, I was young and, cocky. And I said, I can do a hospice company better than these people are doing it.
That's the story of 99% of all entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right, Christian. And thank goodness, right? Because if we didn't have that brashness, we wouldn't take the leap.
No,
that's right.
I was chatting with a good friend of mine, and she and I have the same personality of when we make mistakes, it's usually in the ready, fire, aim category.
Right? Yeah.
And boy, have I paid for mistakes. But guess what? That's also part of one of the reasons why we've been able to have some success, because we were willing to take a leap when it was time to take the leap. So we started Texas Hospice, and it was probably the most difficult thing I've done. And I'm going to remove the qualifier. It was the most difficult thing I've ever done. Harder than residency, harder than medical school, and the main reason is because of the uncertainty involved in it, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to if you go through medical school and you go through residency, look, if you put your head down and work hard, you show up every day and go home, it's a pretty much guarantee that at the end of that, they're going to call you doctor, they're going to turn you loose on patients, and as long as you don't do something really, really stupid, you're going to make a nice living, right?
Right.
There are no guarantees in the business world, right?
No.
And I'll never forget getting into it and realizing, oh my goodness, the competition in hospice care is unbelievable, right? I mean, one hospice patient coming out of a hospital, there'd be 25, 30 hospice companies lined up trying to grab that patient.
Sounds like real estate.
Right.
25 realtors ready to sell their house too.
I'm thinking about listing my home. 200 comments later, everyone's the best realtor you've ever met.
That's right. That's same kind of idea. That marketplace is also what hones us and makes us sharp, right? And it provides excellent products and services, and it creates wealth, and it creates jobs, and it creates talents. It's the crucible in which we grow from being just okay to really, really good. And it's the only way to get there.
That's good. That's good.
So we started it, and we had the usual struggles. I think the key for us was when I realized what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. That was the key for us. And I realized I'm not good at most things. When it comes to vision casting, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to sales, I'm your guy, right? I love it. I have a blast, and we do well. When it comes to anything related to administration or HR or contracts or schedules, I will just mess it up every single time.
I think we have a similar personality in this room.
I think all three of us struggle with administration.
Okay. So if we ever do a business together,
Chris, I wasn't talking about myself, but okay.
Well, I mean, I do use Christian for all of our administrative stuff. I'm just the sales guy. I'm really good at sales. So, but besides the point.
Absolutely, yeah.
I can sell and I can vision cast.
Yeah.
Tell me to make a schedule. You should ask my manager of the logistics company how many times I've made that schedule.
Zero. And thank goodness, right?
Thank goodness it's zero.
Yeah. So but just what you said there, Chris. You said you're a manager at your logistics company, right? You have somebody who's complementary to what your skills are. And that's one of, you would think that would be pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. Guess what? It wasn't to me. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn that the hard way. And we grew really, really fast, but we were just this kind of unwieldy organization, you know, because we didn't have the structure in place yet. Yeah. And I was able to recruit talent, which takes some time to learn to do. I had to retain talent, which is hard to do, and I failed at that sometimes. But once I sort of worked through those processes of hiring talent and retaining talent, we just went, we just took off. And I'll never forget, we brought in this all-star HR person, and 6 months later, we had this great HR handbook that we had about 90 employees. Everybody signed it. And guys, it was like magic. Overnight, it felt like 90% of the problems that we were working on just vanished.
Wow.
And here's what would happen. Before we had that document in place, one of our staffers would come to us and say, hey, I've got 2-3 sick days left. I want to tack them on to the end of my, vacation time. Is that okay? And they asked whoever their manager was, and their manager would go, oh, yeah, I think that's fine, And of course, that created all kinds of problems. Yeah. Once we had that HR policy in place and a handbook that everybody signed and everybody agreed to, if somebody came in and asked for something like that, we'd say, oh, no problem. Let's look it up in the HR handbook.
Right.
Oh, sorry, we can't do that. And you already agreed. I wouldn't say, and you've already agreed to that, but you already agreed to it. And okay. And there's something about that I think is very caring for human beings. Yeah. We human beings, we feel better when there's borders.
Absolutely.
And we kind of know where the edges are and where they're not. And once we kind of know where those are, then we can really run. And that's in my mind, a much more fun way to lead, which is tell folks what we get to do rather than what we can't do or what you shouldn't do. Right. Yeah. I love getting hey, this is our vision. This is where we're going. Yeah. We would, in my current company, we have about 20 employees, really fun little company. And our mission is to provide excellent healthcare and enjoy doing it. Mm. Right? And when we finally settled on that, I thought, I want to work in that company.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Because I believe in excellent healthcare. I think it's cool. It helps people stay engaged in their lives and stay out of the hospital and so on and so forth. And then it says, and enjoy doing it. Yes, that's where I want to be. So we have 4 values that we run with. We have more values than that, but those are the ones that we wrote down. One of them is a culture of respect. Yeah. And so we just, we enjoy doing it. We respect each other. We work for excellence. Yeah. That's a much more fun way to lead rather than telling people what you can't do. But you still have to have those guardrails in place in an organization. And if you don't, it'll look like we looked for the first 2 years of Texas Hospice. It was just kind of unwieldy. So anyhow, we were able to sell Texas Hospice in 2013 to a really big organization called Encompass Home Health and Hospice. Oh, wow. They're fantastic. I was so impressed with them. But it was kind of fun. When someone buys you like that, there's this long due diligence process.
I can imagine.
Right? And that was
in the medical
brutal.
Field, yeah.
That was just brutal. Because I couldn't let any of my staff know that was happening. Oh, no. And it was like having 2 jobs, right? Yeah. And so we finally got to the end of it. We finally closed the deal. And then there's this 6-month period, at least it was for us, when it's a transition time. And they're looking at all of our processes and replacing them with their processes. It was kind of cool. There were a couple of our processes that were better than theirs. Wow. Isn't that kind of fun? That's neat. And they were so big, they had to just kind of put their processes in place. But I remember talking to their people saying, they told us, hey, we really like what you've done here, and we're kind of looking at what we might do differently. That's awesome. That was kind of fun. They told us that we were the 9th hospice company they had purchased, right? But they never seen HR documents or contracts in good a shape as the ones that they found in our company. Can I tell you how much Brian Byrd had to do with that? Zero.
They're telling you how good it was.
Zero. And it was just these wonderful people that I was getting to work with. True story. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't mean to interrupt, but another thing that you mentioned in there that's been a key word that we've had a lot of focus on for this year or toward the end of last year, and now that's going to be a huge focus for us this year, is just that of process. A lot of people don't like the P word, but It's one of those things where process, to your point that you mentioned earlier, it provides guardrails. And it's interesting how I think guardrails can provide freedom for people. You know what you can do and what you can't do, and you know that here's the boundary. And I just love that you talked about process so much in this whole conversation. I'm just hearing it process.
Yes, right. Yeah,
it's encouraging. But it's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is, I don't even know if I want to do process, because that's why I became an entrepreneur, to be free to do whatever I want to do.
Oh, hey, great point. Yeah.
But yet I'm seeing more and more examples, and I think we're going to continue to see these examples where when process is brought in, it provides freedom. It does the opposite of what we expect it to do.
I think that's a great way of putting that, right? And it's similar to our relationship with the Lord. Right?
Absolutely.
He has some things that, hey man, stay away from this. It's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And then once we know where those are, then we can run.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And His purpose is with His strength, so that He gets the glory.
Yeah.
I'll give you another good example of process that really helped us was, I think the performance review is very, very important. And right now there's a lot of work being done in the HR world on performance reviews, whether or not should you save it for, just the once a year thing, which,
right.
And the data on it's fascinating. Nobody likes their performance review. Everybody hates it because they know they're going to get negative feedback in it, right? And no human being likes negative feedback.
Right.
And so there's some work being done on whether or not that should be more kind of spread out through the year. But if you back up and if you look at the performance review, can I tell you, every human being who works in an organization wants to know what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to be working on.
Right.
They want to know what their lane is, and they want to know, how am I doing?
Yeah, clarity.
Yeah.
We want to know, how am I doing here? And it's another piece of the process that, for an entrepreneur might sound, but guess what? It's very respectful. It's very loving to a human being if you do it well, to do good process like that and good performance review. I don't know how many in the nonprofit world and in the for-profit world, I've talked to entrepreneurs and startups, and they'll say, look, all we wanted to do was go serve people. All I wanted to do was serve poor people on the east side of Fort Worth, and yet I'm spending 95% of my time raising money, dealing with employees, making sure we're paying all our bills with our accountant, and all I wanted to do was, serve people.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that entrepreneurs have to figure out is, where is my cutoff point in terms of scale? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And am I a startup only person where, you get this company to 5, 10 employees and it's time to hand it off to somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you more a 20 to 100? And it's, and you need to find out where you are on that. Right. Yeah. Because if you try to push past that, it's going to stop being fun.
Yeah.
And you're going to find yourself doing a bunch of stuff that, guess what? You don't like doing anymore. It's not worth doing that anymore. And so you got to be able to hand it off. Or if you can scale up and hire people who do like doing that stuff, and they're out there, right?
They are.
You think those of us who don't like that kind of stuff think, who in the world would want to do that stuff? No, they're out there. They're very, very good at it. And boy, are they valuable.
Yeah,
no doubt.
That's a key thing. I think we so often forget our identity, whether it be with the Lord, that we're sons and daughters of the Lord, but even knowing our identity and like what we're called to be in the business world. I listened to Gino Wickman, guy who wrote Traction. I listened to him live, and he said one of the biggest issue entrepreneurs have is they don't know when to pull out, because like everything you just said, we all think we can build $100 million business. Yeah. Some of us aren't built to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
And so knowing who you are is essential into knowing when to hand it off and when to your life is going to turn from happiness and joy and fun to probably misery.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a fine line, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. That there is there is some growth that can occur in there. Yeah. So this is a true story. A friend of mine, a guy named Terry Vanderay, lives up in Chicago. Back in the 70s and 80s, he and his brother built this great bus company. So you know how cities need to have bus service, right? Yeah. Well, cities like City of Fort Worth They don't run the bus system. They hire other companies that run the bus system. It's a contract, which is the best way to do it. And so that's what Terry and his brother did. And they had about 1,000 employees, so it's a pretty big company.
Yeah.
But they were working all the time and they weren't having fun anymore.
Yeah.
And a friend of his said, Terry, you need to go get an MBA and learn how to do this because you don't know how to do it yet. Now think about that. This guy had a company with 1,000 employees, right? So he's already 1 in 100,000.
Right.
And somebody said, you don't know how to do this yet. Think about that. So he goes to Harvard MBA. It takes 2 years to do it. And he comes back. He applies the principles that he learned. Yeah. And when he sold, he had 35,000 employees.
Wow.
And he was working fewer hours and having much more fun. He was, don't get me wrong, he was still working hard.
Right.
You have to at that level. But he was having more fun because he had learned some skills that he didn't previously have. And you know what the number one skill he learned was? How to delegate.
Yes.
How to delegate.
That's great.
And you think, wait a minute, he already had 1,000 employees.
Yeah.
But he didn't really know how to delegate because there's so much nuance in that particular skill. Everything from who you're recruiting, how you're recruiting, how you're writing the job descriptions, on and on and on. And once he honed that skill, then he really, really took off. So anyhow, but still, the traction book is spot on. That for me, it is a process, I would say it's still a process, Chris, because so much of my self-esteem is tied up in, how many employees do I have?
Yeah.
Still, I mean, if we're just gonna be real with each other,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't be, and I don't like that about me. And so learning that, I'm good with Brian Byrd, who he is.
Yeah.
If I never get to be Elon Musk's level, and guess what? I never will. Or Steve Jobs, or but that's okay. God made me who I am, and I'm getting to do what I do. Yeah. And if I'm having joy in the Lord, and other people around me are getting to experience that, that I'm good, man. That is what I need. That is what I want. It's what I really want. Best book I've read on this recently, Chris, I might have shared it with you, is called From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks.
Yes.
And it's been #1 on New York Times. And he teaches the most popular class at Harvard Business School called The Secret to Happiness. So he'll start out and, you get all these really sharp 26, 25-year-old kids. And by the way, the class fills up in 9 seconds, and then there's like the 300 wait list or whatever, right? And so he starts it off and he says, tell me, what do you think, what makes you happy? And hey, success. Nope, that won't make you happy. Yeah. Fame. Nope. Pleasure. Nope, won't make you happy. Okay, professor, what will make you happy? And then he says this. He says, look, I'm a social scientist. I've looked at all of this. And if you peel everything back, what makes people happy is having 2 or 3 really close relationships with people.
Wow.
He says the happiest people have that. The unhappy people in the world do not have relationships, regardless of how much money you make, how much fame you have in your life, or how much success you have in your life. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Our pastor, Jamie Miller, talked about, of course that makes sense. Father, Son, Holy Spirit in relationship before the creation of the world. In order to have relationships, you have to be a humble person. You have to be able to forgive. You have to have some skills and some maturity. And it's all of that gives us joy. By the way, he doesn't define happiness as some kind of sugar-coated thing. Right. It's a deep-seated joy. He calls it joy, meaning, and satisfaction. And he unpacks those. Joy, meaning, and satisfaction are how he defines happiness. And he refers to, I'm talking way too much now.
No, you're good.
He refers to the Harvard study that has been running for 87 years now.
Wow.
And so they followed, and it's generations of researchers following the same people, their children, all the way through life. And the book was just published last month in January. It's called The Good Life. And that book comes to the exact same conclusion. It's about having 2 to 3 relationships in your life. So what does that mean for us entrepreneurs? Well, one of the dangers for us, and danger for me, is to get so hyper-focused on what I'm doing here that I neglect these other parts of my life, right? And then that is a recipe for crashing and burning and burnout.
Yeah.
Real quick note on burnout there. a lot of people have the sense that working too many hours causes burnout. No, it doesn't, right? You know what causes burnout is when you're doing something where you don't have vision for it, you're not enjoying it, you're not getting any meaning out of it. That will cause burnout.
Right.
You know, and so, having something you believe in your business is so critical for it. But if you lose that balance in the rest of your life with your family and kids and so on and so forth, you're going to burn out too, because you will be sad without those relationships in your life.
Yeah.
Chris and I were talking beforehand about both my wife and I. My wife is a very talented administrative leader, one of the most talented I've ever been around. And she's a COO for an organization right now that is a $9 million organization. She's kind of she's carrying a lot.
Yeah.
And there have been seasons, our kids are all grown up now, but when they were smaller, when she and I were both working really, really hard, and we didn't see our kids a lot, right? And then there were longer seasons where we were around a lot.
Yeah.
And what it taught our kids, I think, is that, life's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes God calls us into things where you got to work really, really hard for a while.
Right.
But then you've got to pull back and take some breaks and take some rest, or you're not going to make it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to miss the development of relationships within your family and your kids. You've got to have, in my mind, having a both and, I think, has been really healthy for the Byrd family. I don't know.
Well, I can attest to that. Your kids are awesome. And, he's looking at Allison, who's director of Unbound in Europe now. Like, they learned a lot of work ethic, but also this key relationship. So,
yeah, thank you.
I think it worked pretty well for you guys. It's awesome.
We enjoy all three of our kids. We love Allison. Super proud of her, what she's doing right now.
Yeah. Well, I was in Zambia, Africa for a time, and there was a pastor from South Africa, and he kept saying the phrase, people are the currency of heaven. And so everything you're saying about relationships is just so key. And if you miss out on that, then you'll probably miss out on a lot of true happiness and a lot of probably what you're supposed to be doing instead of seeking the $100 million companies and whatnot. And so, but yeah, so since 2013, you sold Texas Hospice in 2013. You've been elected as a city official here in Fort Worth. You ran for mayor. You've opened a family practice. You've been executive pastor at the church I go to now. And so, we talk about like business as missions or business for transformation and all that stuff. And like, you've clearly helped so many people throughout your entire career, and your whole career being a doctor is just helping people. And so what led you to want to just help that many people? What led you to want to be on city council, to run for mayor, to start a family practice after you sold your hospice company? What was kind of like the vision behind all that?
I was really fortunate in that the guy who founded the church that I grew up in, the old McKinney Memorial Bible Church, which is now called Doxology, which is an awesome church. Great leadership. I know their pastor. I know their elders. Was a guy named Bill Garrison. Bill died in 2003 or 2004. Was a former city councilman for the city of Fort Worth.
Okay.
In the last 2 or 3 years of his life, he and I would meet once a week, and he mentored me, discipled me. He was just a treasure trove. I mean, there are just few like Bill Garrison.
Right.
I would ask him, why did you do city council? Because I remember growing up when I was in high school, oh, that's Mr. Garrison. On city council, all this stuff.
Yeah.
He's chairman of the elder board, that's what, and he said, people would ask me, Bill, are you trying to change the culture or change the world? And he says, no. He said, in Jeremiah 29, it says, seek the peace of the city where I've caused you to be carried away captive. Take care of it, steward it. Look for the peace and the prosperity of that city. And of course, that was a message to the Israelites who had been carried away in captivity in Babylon. So I loved all of the sojournness of that message about this is not really my home, but I'm placed here to take care of it. And it takes a lot of work to steward a city. All the zoning that has to be done, making sure we're taxing enough, but not too much, and hiring the right people who are pros at city management and leadership. I mean, approving a budget, this takes a lot of time, and you've got to be able to hear from everybody, because thank goodness our founders put in place a representative democracy. Yeah. Well, guess what? Government by the people, as awesome as it is messy, 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 as we all know. And it just takes time and hard work and a lot of listening to work through it. And anyway, he inspired me to run for city council. So I did in 2017, somehow won. Loved my 4 years. Well, I loved about 60% of it. 40% of it, I'm glad I'm not having to do anymore. Having a tremendous amount of respect for us, our current city leaders, our current mayor, our current city council. But I count it an honor that I got to do that for 4 years. And I ran for mayor, got absolutely demolished in that race. And I was a fairly newbie to politics, and the power brokers in town just came after me hard. And so, but it's like the guy who sort of pastors me now, a good friend. He said, Brian, that election was never about you winning or losing. Wow. It was all about what God was going to do through you.
That's
right.
I
said, Brian, by the way, God doesn't need you in Fort Worth. He can take care of Fort Worth through all kinds of different people. Right. He may choose to use you again there or somewhere else, or he may not. But your main purpose is to follow him within his will and his purposes. And that has been the most helpful thing for me. Running for office is an entrepreneurial
absolutely
effort, right? Because you're taking a tremendous risk when you do that, right. And you risk your name, you risk losing.
Right. Every aspect of who you are.
You put exactly, Christian. You put it all out there, and there's something. I learned a lot, and when human beings see an elected official, they put him in a different category in their mind, and they don't even know they're doing it, and that person is available for free shots like nobody else is. Yeah. Right. And we human beings feel fine about that. And so that was that was a process for me to kind of learn how to do that. There is Wayne Grudem, he's a theologian kind of from the Phoenix area, talks about how when God made the world, he took tremendous risks, right? And ended up risking his son because he loves us so much. And in that sense, entrepreneurism, running for office is a very godlike activity. Someone pointed that out to me, and I read what Wayne had written about that. Read what Wayne had written about that. And that resonated with me. It was like handles to kind of pull myself along here.
Yeah.
I remember the church leaders invited me. It's like about a year ago, and they said, "Hey, we might do a little business persons, kind of a weekend and conference. And what do you think?" And I said, and we haven't done it yet, but hopefully we will. But I said, if you ask me what's the number one job of a business person who is a follower of Jesus, number one job, run a very, very good business.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you got to do. That is what you are called to do. Is it a place where the people who work with you, work for you, enjoy it, and are treated respectfully, and are not overworked or underworked, and so on and so forth? Well, that's a very, very difficult thing to do. Yeah. But that's your number one job. Are you honest in your dealings? Do you follow through with what you, no matter how much it hurts, do you follow through on what you promised that you said you're going to do? And then are you integrous? When you are overpaid, do you pay it back? I'll never forget a buddy of mine told us that when he was a boy, someone broke in and stole some things out of their home and some diamonds and things, and it was worth $7,000, whatever. And they filed the insurance and got paid. Like 6 years later, whoever had stole it from it felt bad and anonymously mailed it back to him. Wow. So they got their diamonds back. He said the first thing his dad did was get his checkbook and write a check out to that insurance company. Wow. And he said that shaped him the rest of his life. I'm not going to mention his name. He was one of the most successful business people in Fort Worth. Wow. And one of his bedrock is integrity. And integrity, there's a short-term loss financially, usually, but there's a huge long-term gain. Yeah. And it's, Lord, give me the vision for the long-term vision for that. Yeah. Going back to where this started, number one job of a Christian business person is run a very, very good business with the values that are from heaven.
Yes.
That is the number one.
That's so good.
Once that's there, then that's a platform for discipleship and evangelism.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about the hope that is within me.
And again, that goes back to the currency of heaven.
It is tied in exactly to that. I think that is a great way to talk about the power of that. Exactly. And how it gives you and me as Christian businessmen purpose beyond this world into eternal purpose.
Absolutely.
Without which, what's the point of it anyway?
Right.
That's exactly it.
There's absolutely no point in it anyway.
No. You get to Ecclesiastes real quick.
Vanity,
Meaningless
meaningless
waste, meaningless, toiling under the sun, because you go. There's no value. There's no heartbeat in this.
Oh, that's a good way of putting that.
And but that's so good. That's so good. I love that.
I do too.
For sharing with us all of this.
Oh man, listen, I'm glad I get to do it. I'm super impressed with you guys for putting this thing together and having the vision for it, because this takes time and energy and money. And
well, that's why we hired Bryson.
Yeah,
because he knows what he's doing over there. He was
Thank
doing
goodness.
stuff here. I have no idea what he was doing.
Yeah, we don't
thank
really
you,
know what Bryson does.
It's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, we know he needs to have some good barbecue. He has never been to Goldie's, so we're working on
barbecue.
that.
Oh, what's your favorite barbecue in Florida?
Railhead. I love Railhead.
Railhead
and Cousins are both very good.
Man.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you had Railhead barbecue?
Oh yeah.
Have you had Heim, Hurtado?
I've had Heim's great. Sure.
Hurtado. That's
I have not had Hurtado that I'm aware of.
To have a barbecue tour. I feel like
barbecue tour coming up.
a podcast barbecue tour.
Oh, it's a great idea.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. You know what? We Texans, we're terrible at driving on the ice.
Oh,
right?
no
But we
doubt.
know barbecue.
Just
We know
like last
barbecue.
week, keep your rear end in your house,
Yeah.
right? But we are dadgum good at barbecue.
Yes, we
No
are.
doubt.
So last question. I know we're coming up on our time here. What's next for Dr. Brian Byrd?
Yeah. Thanks for that. I was just taking a sip of water here.
Yeah, not allowed.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I have a number of things that are, our pastor's been talking about the big rocks in the jar that could come about. There's an election cycle happening, about to kick off right now for city council. I'm not running for any seat, but I'm actively recruiting. I'm actively getting behind candidates because I think it's very, very important who we have on city council. And I'm now in a position where if I get behind somebody, I can pull other people behind that person and I can influence an election. And so I want to make sure I steward that very, very well. Yeah. There'll be the next election cycle after that is about this time next year, and it'll be a March primary. And there will be, who knows what's going to happen. There's some long-time, wonderful people who have served, and some of those people may or may not be stepping down. And if they do, I'll take a look at something. And if they don't, I'm having a blast doing what I'm doing right now, which is I get to lead a bunch of great people at Texas Family Medicine who get to serve patients, provide excellent health care, and enjoy doing it. And the other thing I really enjoy doing is working with Search Ministries, and we take people, mostly people who are not professors of Christ, who do not profess Christ as their Lord, through a book called More Than a Carpenter. And my friend Bill Craftston leads that. I bring the group together, and we say all ideas are welcome here. And but we basically just say, here's the case for that God exists, that Jesus existed, that he rose from the grave, and the resurrection is the whole key to it. And it's a fascinating look at what are the proofs for and against the resurrection. And it's very hard to come away and say the resurrection didn't happen. I mean, you have to do some intellectual gymnastics to say, nah, it didn't happen. There's too much historical proofs on the books for us to say that. And so I just love walking people through that. It's just a very loving, very open environment. And so that's what's on the books for Stephanie and me right now.
So what I heard is that in a couple of years you're going to be running for office. Did you hear that, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who knows?
But here's the other thing. Here's the other thing I know Brian is doing just because I was with him, but he's traveling with his kids because we even went to London together.
Yes, we did. That was such a blast. That was your idea too.
We need to do that again.
Yes, please.
And go see some more football matches.
It's not American football, by the way.
Not American football we're talking about.
Yeah. Clear and specific.
We saw some good games. We saw Manchester City versus Arsenal.
Yes.
You and Wyatt went to Liverpool versus Chelsea.
Yes, that was a blast.
And then we all went to Man United versus Wolves.
Yeah.
And then after
Remind me who won that game. Man U. He's a big Man U fan.
That hurts a little bit, but it's okay. I'll forgive you on this one. Yeah, and then after you left, I also went to Chelsea versus Tottenham.
Oh, that's great.
At Stamford Bridge.
Oh.
So, but yeah, Dr. Byrd, thank you so much for just coming on and sharing your story and just how you love to help people and how your vision for entrepreneurship has led you to do all these incredible things and a lot of hard things, a lot of great things, and you're still doing great things. And thank you so much for all this. And hopefully we can have you back on soon and talk more. Maybe after our barbecue tour, we can.
Great.
So, as long as I get an invitation to the barbecue tour, I just have to tune in, right?
It's expected.
No, you have to go on the barbecue tour. Maybe that's what we do. All guests go on a barbecue tour.
That is.
That's what we do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, then, if I'd have known that beforehand, I for sure would have done that.
Oh, we can't play all our cards at once.
No, that's
you
guys are smart, man. You guys are 2 steps ahead of me. I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. I think it's really cool how well you guys are already connected all over this city. And when I'm I grew up here, and so I have that advantage. But almost everybody I talk to, oh yeah, I've heard of those guys. Oh yeah, I've spent some time with Chris. Oh yeah, So way to go in making those connections and just being a friend to people. Fort Worth's a unique town in that way, right? We're the big city with a small town feel. We want to keep it that way. And those of us who are leading in this community have the opportunity to propagate that and keep that going and bring Jesus' love to it. Anyway, hey, really cool for you guys to have me on. I count it as an honor. Thanks very much.
Thank you. To our listeners, thank you guys for listening. Tune in to the next episode. And again, for any hard money lending or private money needs, Arise Capital, hit us up on our website.